Greetings and welcome back to Haftarot, the weekly video cast series in which we take a look at the upcoming week's Haftara, understand its message and content, and its relationship to the Kriyat Torah of that Shabbat. This week, we are starting a special period of what is known as the four Parshiot, and the first one of them is Shkalim, and as a result of that, the Haftara that we read is related specifically to the theme of Shkalim, and not to this week's parasha, which is Mishpatim. So a few words about the four parashiot. As you can see, the Mishnah in Masechet Megillah presents us with the laws of what is to be read on the special four Shabbatot. Now, the special four Shabbatot are the Shabbat of Rosh Chodesh Adar, which happens this year, or Rosh Chodesh Adar happens during the week, the Shabbat beforehand. So it'll be at the end of Shvat. The next one is going to be the Shabbat before Purim. The next one is going to be the Shabbat before Shabbat HaChodesh, and the last one will be Shabbat HaChodesh. Shabbat HaChodesh will be on Shabbat Rosh Chodesh Nisan, or the Shabbat before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So as a result of that, there will always be one Shabbat skipped somewhere in that system, and sometimes even two. This year, because of the calendar, the way the calendar plays out, we will be skipping the middle Shabbat. So this Shabbat we'll be reading Shkalim. The Shabbat following we'll be reading Parashat Zachor about Amalek in anticipation of Purim. And then we'll skip a week. And the next week we'll read Parah, the laws of Parah Adumah, to prepare us to become Tahor so we can do Korban Pesach. And the next one will be Shabbat HaChodesh, in which we will read the special reading about Korban Pesach in anticipation again of bringing the Korban Pesach. The reason Shkalim is read now is because the yearly donation of the Machatzit shekel, which was to be brought to Yerushalayim, was to be brought during the month of Adar, because the collection had to be completed before Rosh Chodesh Nisan, so that all of the korbanot that were brought from Rosh Chodesh Nisan and on were brought from the new collection. And as a result of that, there would be a public announcement on Rosh Chodesh Adar. The Mishnah in Shkalim says, and they would make a public announcement that it's time to start getting ready to bring your machatzit shekel. You had to make change. You sent them with a group, etc., and all of that preparation would go on. And as a result of that, we read Parashat Shkalim. Now, the reading of these four parashiot may be one of the oldest public readings that we have of Kriyat Torah. The Tosefta, as you can see in the second source here, not only lists what we read on the Shabbatot, but we read for the Haftara. And you notice that along with Parashat Shkalim, I put the Haftarot in blue. Parashat Shkalim should be Yehodaya Kohen, and that's the piece we're going to look at very briefly today. Zachor, we take a look at the story of Shaul and Amalek. Parah Adumah, we read the section in Yechezkel that talks about the purification of Am Yisrael. And Achodesh Azalachem, we read another passage in Yechezkel that has to do with the Korban HaPesach. And then at the end, the Tosefta here presents when the Shabbat Rishonah, etc., is, including the thing about skipping, which I mentioned earlier. The Parshat Shkalim, there's actually a dispute in the Gemara, which is the Parshat Shkalim that we read. Is it Korbani Lachmi Leishai, the beginning of chapter 28 in Bamidbar, or is it the beginning of Parshat Ki Tisa, which is the mitzvah to give the machatzit shekel, and that's of course what our practice is. But what about the Haftara? So as you can see here, the Haftara is from the book of Malachim, Perek Yud Aleph, Pasuk Yod Zayin, all the way to Perek Yud Bet, Pasuk Yod Zayin. And the background of the story is that when Atalia, who was a daughter of Achav and had become the queen in Yehuda, and her husband had been killed, she wiped out the whole royal family. She ruled by herself. She's a terrible woman. And they were able to save one of her very young sons, Yoash, and keep him hidden for 6 years. And Yehoyada Kohen, who was evidently the Kohen Gadol, brought him out when he was 7, and crowned him and had Atalia killed. Great moment. And Yoash was this very young king who was overseen and was sort of regented, if you will, by Yehoyada Kohen. And so you see at the beginning of the Haftara, Yehoiada made a covenant, a pact between Hashem and the people and the king. So that now we're going to put things together. We're going to resolve the difficulties that were raised as a result of Atalia, this wicked woman being in charge, and we're going to do tshuva. And the second half of this story, we hear, starting here in Pasuk Zayin, that in Yoash's 23rd year, which means he's all of 30 years old, we find that the Kohanim had not maintained the physical structure of the Beit HaMikdash. And so he called for a donation, and the process of the donation that was going on here is a process which is then adopted by the Mishnah and Masachet Shkalim to describe how Shkalim are brought. And people would bring in their Shkalim, they bring in their donations, and the donations all went for something called Bedek Habayit, which means the upkeep, the maintenance of the Beit HaMikdash, although halachically the term has a broader application. And this description is a description that fits very well with Parshat Shkalim, because it is the one description we have in all of the Nevi'im about a mass donation of silver and of money to the Beit HaMikdash for its upkeep. And as a result of that, that's the Haftara that we read. Next week, very excitingly, we're going to be reading the story of Shaul and Amalek as part of our celebrating and commemorating the Shabbat of Zachor. Until then, we will see each other. In the meantime, Shabbat Shalom.